What if I told you not all lone wolf attacks are done alone? In fact, research suggests large online communities, or digital herds, enable and support the individuals who carry out these acts of terror. So how do we stop these hateful occurrences from happening? Political strategist Charles Ellison says the first step might be changing the way we look at the people behind these acts.
It is terrorism. It's not a hate crime. They're all involved in the same sorts of digital social networks that all lead back to sort of the same sources and the same agendas.
Let's face it, racist acts of violence against Black people and people of color in America are nothing new. White supremacists have been inflicting violence on people of color since this country was colonized, from the genocide of indigenous populations to the mass lynchings of Black people to the incarceration of Japanese nationals and Japanese Americans. What we have seen in recent times, though, is the decentralization of hate groups and the rise of what are being called lone wolf attacks. These acts are often carried out by a single person with a high-powered weapon and result in mass casualties. Examples include the shooting that targeted Latinx individuals in El Paso, Texas, the slaying of Black Bible study participants in Charleston, South Carolina, and more recently, the deadly events that occurred in Buffalo, New York. The terms lone wolf or lone actor can be misleading because it suggests these acts of terror are isolated. It conveys the idea that the people who carry out these acts have no connection to a larger group and few others would do similar things. On the contrary, investigations into these attacks often find that the perpetrators are active members in hateful online communities that spew white supremacy ideologies.
Warfare is very asymmetrical now. It's not conventional by any means like how it used to be, say like during the Civil War or during World War I, World War II. It's based on guerrilla warfare tactics. It's based on being very agile. It's going to be one of those things where, okay, well, what's the most effective way to exact violence and to kill however many numbers of people? Well, you do it in a way in which you preserve an element of surprise.
In the case of Dylan Roof, the Charleston shooting perpetrator, investigators at the Southern Poverty Law Center found he was seemingly active on a white supremacist web forum where it appears he expressed racist and xenophobic thoughts. According to CNN, the Buffalo shooter regularly engaged in hate-filled dialogue on the online forum 4chan. The shooter reportedly told others that during March 2022, he visited the supermarket at noon, 2 p.m., and 4 p.m., making note of how many Black and white patrons he saw in the store. He then drew a map showing the store's aisles and exits. A couple months later, he walked into the store with tactical gear and a semi-automatic weapon, killing 10 people and wounding 3. Experts say that while lone wolves and other white supremacists use platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Discord, and 4chan to exchange ideologies and conspiracies in the open, they sometimes use encrypted apps like Signal to exchange more private information. Online groups have even used walkie-talkie apps like Zello to organize themselves during attacks.
We need to dismantle not just racism and the dangerous agenda that comes along with it, but the terrorism too. And there are ways to do that. There are laws that have been put in place that people still don't know about to this day that can help respond to that.
To reduce this uptick in white supremacist violence, Ellison says law enforcement agencies need to be more prepared to prevent attacks and react more swiftly and aggressively once an attack occurs. Ellison writes, "Too often, white domestic terrorists, such as the one arrested in Buffalo on Saturday, are treated with an unusual level of care and sensitivity by law enforcement after committing such atrocities. One way to respond to these attacks is to use the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, according to Ellison. The law designated white supremacist groups such as the Ku Klux Klan as domestic terrorists and allowed the federal government to use the military to combat the heinous acts the group carried out. The law led to the indictment of hundreds of members and ultimately a reduction of violence in the South."
President Biden needs to be like President Grant in 1871. Use the Klan Act. Okay, what can we use from the Klan Act right now to effectively defeat or to clap back against this white nationalist terrorism, same kind we had during Reconstruction?
Because today's white supremacists operate within these loosely structured networks, they are too often able to mobilize under the radar of law enforcement. Governments must identify people susceptible to radicalization and invest in prevention programs, as well as initiatives dismantling hate and extremism.